An angry stranger storms into a cafe, pointing a finger at Barron Trump. What happens next? A conversation so unexpected that it leaves everyone questioning their own assumptions. It was a breezy afternoon in the heart of Philadelphia, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee drifted from the corner cafe. Inside, a mix of chatter and clinking cups created a warm, inviting atmosphere. Barron Trump sat at a small table near the window, his tall frame slightly hunched over a thick book. He wasn't trying to draw attention. Wearing a plain hoodie and jeans, he blended into the crowd. Or so he thought. He had come here for a simple reason, a moment of quiet. As the youngest son of a former president, his life had often been a whirlwind of public appearances and scrutiny. But here, among strangers sipping lattes and scrolling through their phones, he felt an unusual sense of anonymity. Barron was engrossed in his book when a sharp voice suddenly cut through the cafe's hum. "You think you're better than the rest of us?" The voice was loud enough to stop conversations. Heads turned toward a man standing a few feet from Barron's table. He looked to be in his late 40s with a weathered face and a fiery expression. His clothes weren't tattered, but they bore the unmistakable wear of someone who had seen hard times. His tone was confrontational, his body tense. For a moment, Barron froze, not out of fear, but surprise. This wasn't something he had anticipated when he chose this cafe for a quiet afternoon. The tension in the room thickened as all eyes focused on the unfolding scene. "You've had everything handed to you on a silver platter," the man continued, his voice trembling with anger. "Do you even know what it's like to struggle?" Other patrons exchanged uneasy glances, unsure whether to intervene or stay silent. The barista behind the counter hesitated, her hand hovering near the phone. Barron's calm demeanor stood in stark contrast to the man's intensity. Slowly, he closed his book, set it on the table, and looked up. "Sir," he said, his voice steady but quiet, "I'm not sure what's upset you, but maybe we could talk about it." The man scoffed. "Talk? You want to talk? What could you possibly say that someone like me would want to hear?" The cafe fell eerily silent. People waited, holding their breath. But instead of matching the man's aggression, Barron did something no one expected, something that changed everything. He leaned back in his chair, relaxed but attentive. The man's anger pulsed through the room, making even those watching from afar uneasy. But Barron didn't flinch. Instead, he gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Please sit," he said calmly, his tone disarming. The unexpected offer took the man aback. He hesitated, tension still in his shoulders, his fists clenched. "Why would I sit with someone like you?" the man sneered. "You're just another spoiled kid who'll never know what it's like to live in the real world." A few patrons shifted uncomfortably. The barista subtly moved, as if considering whether to step in. But Barron remained composed. "Maybe you're right," Barron admitted, his voice measured. "I haven't walked in your shoes, but if you sit down, maybe you can tell me what that's like." For a second, the man faltered. Barron's tone wasn't a challenge. It was an invitation. Still, instead of taking the seat, the man leaned in closer, his voice low but sharp. "You think I owe you my story? You think that'll make you feel better about yourself?" he snapped, dripping with sarcasm. Barron's gaze remained steady. "I think everyone has a story that deserves to be heard." His words hung in the air, cutting through the silence. The man hesitated, as if unsure whether to lash out again or accept the unexpected civility. The other customers watched, their curiosity now mixed with an odd sense of hope. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the man grabbed the back of the empty chair and dragged it noisily across the floor. He sat, crossing his arms defensively, his jaw tight. His eyes studied Barron, as if searching for a crack in his calm demeanor. "Fine," he muttered. "You want to hear about the real world? I'll tell you." The tension in the cafe shifted. Not gone, but no longer suffocating. The barista lowered her hand from the phone. The patrons leaned in slightly, pretending not to eavesdrop, but hanging on every word. Barron nodded. "I'm listening." And so the man began to speak. But what came next wasn't just a story, it was a revelation. He took a deep breath, his chest rising and falling as if steadying himself. When he spoke, his voice was quieter, but no less raw. "You look at me and see someone angry for no reason. But you don't know what it's like to lose everything, he said, bitterness laced in his tone. He glanced around the cafe, daring anyone to interrupt, then looked back at Barron. I had a job, a family, a decent life. Then the factory I worked at shut down. Just like that, gone. Hundreds of us left with nothing but promises that they'd relocate us. Promises that never came true. The cafe was silent, save for the faint hiss of the espresso machine. I tried to hold it together for my wife and kids, he continued, his tough exterior cracking. Worked whatever odd jobs I could find. But when you're scraping by, it doesn't take much to break you. My wife, she left. Took the kids with her. Said she couldn't live like this anymore. He paused, his eyes glistening. I can't even blame her. Barron remained silent, his face unreadable, but there was no mistaking the empathy in his eyes. The man's fingers traced the grain of the wooden table as he spoke again, his voice lower. Do you know what it's like to walk into a room and know everyone is looking at you, judging you, thinking you're nothing? That's my life now. Every single day. His words hit hard, not just for Barron, but for everyone listening. A woman at a nearby table shifted, suddenly engrossed in her coffee, as if trying to process what she had just heard. And then I see someone like you, the man continued, his voice rising slightly, sitting here in your fancy clothes, reading a book like you don't have a care in the world. And it makes me mad, because no matter what I do, I'll never have what you have. Silence. Barron didn't rush to respond. He let the man's pain settle, respecting its weight. Finally, he leaned forward. I don't know what it's like to be in your shoes, he said softly, but I do know what it's like to feel judged, to have people assume they know who you are before you've even said a word. The man looked up sharply, his eyes narrowing. What could you possibly know about that? Barron took a deep breath. His voice was calm but carried a weight that made everyone in the cafe lean in just a little closer. You might think I have it easy because of my name, and in some ways, you're right. I've never had to worry about food or a roof over my head, but that doesn't mean I don't know what it's like to be misunderstood. The cafe was utterly still. Even the barista had paused, her tray momentarily forgotten. I'm not here to argue, Barron continued. I just want to understand, because I think we're all carrying things no one else sees. And maybe, just maybe, we'd be a little kinder if we did. The man exhaled sharply as if releasing something heavy. He studied Barron, his tough exterior cracking just a little more. You're not what I expected, he admitted. The cafe had changed. The tension had dissolved, replaced with something else. Understanding. And in that quiet moment, everyone there realized something. Sometimes all it takes is a conversation to change everything.